The conversation that we're doing today is regarding meaningful connections. And what I was inspired to offer in this talk is to speak a little bit more to how we can connect to students right now during a more challenging time where you might not be able to get as close physically to students, you might not be able to be hands-on with them, and how we can support them even from afar. Sorry for those on. I'm just adjusting this camera a little bit. And it is so important that for us as teachers that we're able to create these connections, even if they're from far away, even if they're online. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, how we can do that. First off, I think it is really essential as teachers that we are not only able to create meaningful connections outside of ourselves, but also meaningful connections within. So I'd like to start us off with a short meditation just to get us fully centered and able to really feel and experience from our heart. So with that intention in mind, set one palm over top your belly and one palm over top your heart. And even those who aren't sitting cross-legged in Sukhasana like I am, even if you're laying on the couch, you can follow along too. Close your eyes. Begin to feel your breath move into your belly, rib cage, and even collarbones. Exhale, everything softens towards your spine. Inhaling, expand low belly, mid belly, upper chest. Exhale, let everything go. Continue to flow with this same intentional quality in the frequency of your breath. It makes so much sense that we are bridging this gap between our lower hand on our lower belly and the area around our heart. Our lower hand, some of the circumstances that can arise are fear, judgment, shame. While our heart is this place that has so much capacity for love, compassion, forgiveness. How can we let go of what's not serving us and tap into the wisdom we've always known? And take a full breath in through your nose. Soft, fluid exhale out mouth. Two more, breathe in. Last time. Release your hands down. Flicker your eyelids open. So thank you all so much for joining in for that little tune-in session before we get into the talk. So with meaningful connections, there's a few things that we have to consider with our students. Being a strong leader is number one. So right now, and depending on where you are in the world, where you are watching this, I know that many of us are under very different guidelines and very different restrictions. Here where I am in Whistler, British Columbia, Canada, there are very specific public health orders for us to follow. And then we are also taking the additional step in this studio to make sure that our teachings and everything that we're doing are truly supporting our students and our teachers in staying safe and protected right now. And so the biggest element of being a strong leader is to honor whatever restrictions or guidelines, and even being open to taking feedback from your students to make sure they feel safe to walk into the studio. For us here, right now, we have masks that students enter into the studio with. They're allowed to sit on their mat, and then when they leave, they also have to put their masks on. So even for me as a teacher, and to be a leader, not just to the one student, but to everyone who is entering the class, is to be super confident in setting boundaries with students, so that if somebody walks into the studio space without a mask on, that I am fully comfortable in standing in my power and saying, hey, would you mind putting a mask on? And if they don't have a mask, being able to provide one to them. So for us as teachers, we have to consider how these boundary setting practices are really important, not just so that you are safe and so that that student is safe, but also that everyone else knows that you are showing up and you are there for them right now. So number one, please make sure you are sticking with your guidelines and restrictions. I know that some people have different perspectives on this, but right now we're all just doing the best we can to make this work. The next element of meaningful connections with your students is, what can we do as teachers with observational skills? So for us at the studio, we have a platform from which we teach on. Right now, we are sticking to that platform. And for some of you, you might be able to walk around the room still, maybe with a mask on, and that's great if that's what your studio is doing, if that's what your classes are making happen. And so with observational skills, even from afar, we might be able to get some information about how we can support students better. So what I have been doing is being really conscious that I am using names. So using the name of your student, so saying, hey, Jessica, I noticed that your foot looks a little narrow. Can you bring your foot out wider? And being very specific in terms of how you're using your body language and how you are communicating to that student. Some students will pick up easier on auditory information by just telling them. They'll be able to get it right away. Some are more visual or kinesthetic learners. The kinesthetic is a little tougher. They might need to kind of figure it out on their own. And then with visual, you might be able to use visual cues like your hands by directing with your fingers, by showing them with body language can be very helpful. And figuring out what type of learner that student is, it will usually come pretty quickly. And there might even be a conversation with them. Some students, especially if they're super far away, if they're in the back corner of the room, might not feel totally comfortable in having a conversation with you across the room, and that makes perfect sense. But even a head nod is great. Even a thumbs up is perfect. And you can also communicate this and let them know, hey, does this adjustment work for your body? Give me a thumbs up or just nod your head. You can be very clear on how that conversation goes with your students. And also on that note, being very clear with letting them know if that doesn't work for them, then there is no obligation to stay there. And you may have noticed as a teacher, and I know I've noticed this many times over the years, is sometimes you will offer an assist, an adjustment, and the student will kind of look uncomfortable or look unsure, and you can verbally ask them, hey, is this working for your body? Or, hey, what does this feel like for you? And to get that feedback from them, because even though we've tried these things in our own practice and felt them in our own body, and maybe it works really, really well for us, that might not always speak to every single student. Most of us know that every body is just very different, that everyone has had different experiences in terms of what they do every day. Some people are at a desk every day, some people are running every day, swimming every day. We don't know what's happening in their body. So to communicate with them very clearly about what is working for them, what's not working, and just letting them know, like, hey, if you want to experiment with this posture, if you want to go back to how you were before, then that is totally fine. For us, it is very empowering to let go of the outcome that we have. Sometimes as teachers, we might have a certain outcome or expectation about what someone's yoga practice looks like. And you know what? It is their practice. It is their expression of their yoga. And we are here to support them as teachers. We are not here to tell them exactly what to do every minute of the practice. So being able to let that go is super liberating as a teacher. And there's a lot for us to learn and process as well about the practice when seeing it in other students' bodies. Applying, assisting, and adjusting techniques with social distancing in place. So for some of us, depending on what the rules look like, I know, like I said, right now we're not really moving off the teacher platform, but if you are able to walk around with mask on or whatever that guideline looks like to you where you are in the world, if you are able to walk around, sometimes being able to walk all the way around a student to see how their body is adjusting to the posture is really valuable to be able to assist and adjust for them. Sometimes this can be done, like even if you can't walk all the way around a student, just walking to the right and to the left, seeing the angles of their feet, the angles of their hips, their shoulders, and getting a full picture of what that looks like before offering the adjustment. Even from afar, you might have an intuitive sense about what that assist and adjust looks like. I gave the example earlier with the foot. In a lunge, for instance, sometimes we might see someone's foot pointing in. We might see a very narrow stance when we see that a student might really benefit from a wider stance. You also see this a lot of the time in Warrior 2 with foot placement. And from certain angles, depending on when you are standing in relation to that student, it might not be as obvious. And so that is a chance to have a verbal conversation with them again and say, hey, Jack, how does your ankle feel in this position? Is your knee stacked over top your hip? And you can even let them know if they don't seem very comfortable with an actual conversation. You could say, give me a thumbs up if it seems good, or nod your head if it's a yes. And if it's anything less than a head nod, then you give them a suggestion. So if you say, hey, Jack, is your knee stacked over top your ankle? And they kind of look unsure. Then you could respond with, how would it feel to bend your knee a little bit deeper in that position, or to take a shorter stance? And to give these suggestions and to have them be able to play and experiment with how that shape is going to work for them. Now, in some classes, this isn't going to work for every single posture and every single person. Like I said earlier, everyone processes things quite differently. So if someone is a visual learner versus auditory versus kinesthetic, their experience and how they process that information is going to be quite different. So for some students, we might actually need to say, hey, don't worry about it. Keep doing what you're doing. And let's talk about this after class. So if you have a little bit of time after class to clinic workshop this posture a little bit for them, even just a minute or two, and then actually have a conversation with them one-on-one, then that can be extremely valuable for the student. One of the big questions, and this kind of comes back to being able to walk around the student or how much you can walk around the room, is what you can see and what you cannot see. Because sometimes what you cannot see actually provides a lot more information about the posture. And that comes back to having conversations, that comes back to communicating with students, and possibly little workshops after class, or even following up. If you don't have time after class, even just following up with an email to your student and saying, hey, I noticed that your Warrior 2, or I noticed that your lunge, it didn't look like you were always steady, stable, and comfortable. Let's see how we can improve that and how you might be able to experiment at home so that it works really well for you in the future. And in that way, students really appreciate that feedback. And that in itself is a super meaningful connection that you showed that student that you care about their experience, you care about their practice, and that you want to be there for them to make sure they are safe and they're honoring their body. Finally, one of the biggest things is what we can do to support students learning from afar. So what can we do to bridge that gap from a classroom environment where we are teaching a very specific practice, where although there's some communication, there's some meaningful connections here and there, that we're making eye contact with students? That's another one, and one that can be quite scary sometimes, is to actually make eye contact with your students and to smile. And you know what? Sometimes people are super focused. You will not always get a smile back. And to be okay with that and to understand that it is not about you, and in fact, it is probably far, far away from being about you. And to know that you just showing up with your bright energy is going to foster meaningful connections as well. So making eye contact with students, communicating. And to support students from afar, there are a few ways that we can do that outside of the classroom after students leave their mat and go home. So one way we can do that is with blog posts. So to be able to share your knowledge online is super powerful. Whatever knowledge you consider, and whenever you're putting out any type of content to help foster these meaningful connections and to really support your students and their practice, is to consider, what are my students coming to my class for? What is it they want to learn? What is it they want to take away from this experience? And then if you are writing blog posts, to consider, okay, are my students interested in asana practice? Is there elements of, if we're looking at Warrior 1, Warrior 2, is there something there that students really want to draw from? Are there places where students are confused, or you notice the same things coming up in class that you want to break down in a profound way for them to have this transformative experience when they come back onto their mat? Maybe they want to learn and delve deeper into the philosophy of the practice. So there's many opportunities to connect with your students, and it really lies in where their interests are and what they want to gain out of their practice. The next kind of way to connect, and this can be very powerful, and we're doing it right now, is through video. And it doesn't have to be live. I know a lot of people are scared of live, and for myself, I know the live thing, it was definitely a little bit terrifying because it is very much feels like a one-way conversation, even though I know that there's 11 people right now on the other side hanging out with me, which is awesome. Welcome to everyone. And I know there's a few of you who I know personally in real life. And one of the things about videos that I found really useful in creating them is to consider who is on the other side. And again, that comes back to, what do they want to learn out of this experience? So I know that many of you are teachers, many of you want to support your students, and so being able to speak to that is wonderful. And considering how you are integrating this into your life, into your practice, into your teaching. And I even think about specifically who is on the other side and the people that I've met through your yoga flow. And for me, that's allowed me to infuse authenticity into the videos. Sometimes with creating videos, whether it's pre-recorded or live, it might feel difficult because it does feel one-sided at times. And to understand that there is someone on the other side that you are helping to know that the intention you're showing up with is felt, that is extremely powerful. And it's something that we can't always see, but that we have to understand and feel within ourselves. And if we know that on a deep level, then we're able to show up fully for those students on the other side of the screen. And with videos, you don't always have to be asana based. Like today, no asana for me. They don't always have to be pose breakdowns. They can be philosophy or whatever you feel passionate about offering. They can be about teaching. They can be about, there's so many things that we can expand into in the yoga realm. And so to consider who is watching on the other side, what would they be interested in learning, and how can you support them on a deeper level? Finally, with social media. So social media is a really wonderful and strange tool that's kind of really blown up for many of us, and we're on it right now, which is great. And social media realistically was created with the intention of having meaningful connections. I know that it's kind of gone in different directions these days, but I really feel like the positive aspect of social media really for teachers is a huge advantage, and for students as well, that there's a really strong learning environment there that can be fostered. And so with social media, a few things that we'd want to consider to show up for our students is what we are posting to support their learning. So are we doing how-to posts? Are we offering philosophy? Are we getting into the deeper aspects of the practice? What is it that your students want to gain? And I think social media, it might be tempting to only do these types of posts. And although these are extremely valuable to create a meaningful connection with students, I think there needs to be a level of vulnerability there. So being able to show up and be fully honest with what's happening for you, in those situations like earlier this year when shit kind of hit the fan for most people, I think, that we are fully honest that it's not all rainbows, butterflies, and sunshine all of the time. And when we take down that veil, that wall, and when we show up with that level of vulnerability, I feel like so many students can really feel that and understand that this is not just a teacher who's showing me all these things. This is a real human being, and we're all having this human experience, and we are all in this together. So in terms of meaningful connections, not only are we showing up with that integrity in our classes, but also off of the mat as well. So that is all of my biggest, most juicy, important parts of creating meaningful connections with our students. Hey, Andrea, nice to see you on here. And I know there's a few others on here as well. I'm on a cell phone, so I don't always see as much as I would like to. But if any of you have any questions, or if you're curious about anything that's happening in your classes or teaching online, or however you're creating meaningful connections with students right now, I would love to hear your questions. If anyone has any, I'll wait a minute here. And that's okay. If you're just curious what I have to say, then all good. You are welcome here. Well, if no one has any questions, and of course, if you're watching the replay of this, please comment. I'll be keeping an eye on this video once it's posted, and I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to hear what's happening in your studio, what guidelines you have, how you're curious about supporting students deeper in their practice on and off their mat. So please come to me with your questions on this. And we'll finish off with another little meditation. So flip your palms open skywards, a gesture that just tells the universe you are open and ready to receive. Okay. So I have one question before we finish off with a little meditation. So Jorge, I hope I'm saying that right. Jorge, you find it hard to fully assist as you can't always see the student's position at all times. Okay, that's very fair. I know that sometimes I have to, while I'm on a teaching platform, I might need to move around if there's other students that are kind of in the way. I find that oftentimes intuitively, if I look at even the person's upper body, if they seem, for instance, like if they seem unstable, if it seems like, there's part of their body that looks uncomfortable, I might use that conversational technique and just say like, hey, Ted, are your feet hip distance apart? Or do you have a stable foundation? Are you rooting down through the balls of your foot and your heel? And asking very specific questions. And at any point, if they look confused or if they're unsure, then you might be able to say, what would it feel like to take your foot out wider? Or what would it feel like to look at your arms and to see, like there's so many little ways that we can communicate what they're feeling rather than just straight up telling them exactly what to do. So even though observational skills are super valuable, there's a way that we can communicate to students that doesn't necessarily require that observation or that full observation. Oh, thanks, Siobhan. Well, nice to see you too. And Jorge, I really hope that covered what you were looking for in that. I know observation can be a tough one sometimes, but it's not always the pinnacle. And I really feel like intuitively that we can feel what is happening for someone on some level and to be able to offer some direction and some inquisition. And essentially, that is all we really want to do for our students is to create inquiry for them so that they can essentially be their own teacher at the end of the day. Oh, amazing, Natasha. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you found value on this. I know it's a strange thing to be online sometimes, and it can feel a little weird and a little bit of adjusting. But I promise you that there's definitely ways to still be able to show up for others. That's very powerful. All right. Please come to a nice, tall, comfortable seat, everyone. And again, if you're laying on a couch, that's fine. You can still practice along with us. Flip your palms open skywards, and that just tells the universe that you're open and ready to receive. Then close your eyes. Feel which areas in your body you feel grounded and connected. Perhaps your ankles, your shins, or your thighs. Let both sit bones root deeper into the earth. And feel your heart stack over top your hips and your head stack over top your heart. Then let your shoulders melt away from your ears. Let your arms and the backs of your hands sink a little bit deeper. And let go of any tension in your face, your forehead, and your jaw. Relaxing the space between your brows and letting eyelids sink a little bit deeper. Then set your attention onto your breath. Feeling the soft expansion of each inhale, the gentle depth of your exhale. Continuing to stay fully anchored to that movement occurring in your breath. And set your hands in front of your heart in Anjali Mudra. And since our intention is to show up fully for others and to foster these deep and meaningful connections, we'll seal our life today with one vibration of Om, the sound that connects us all. Exhale to empty your lungs. Inhale. Thank you for showing up with your light. Namaste. Beautiful. I noticed there's a couple other questions. I promise I'll make sure to come back to you in the comments, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today on live and with the intention of supporting your students and continuing your education. I really appreciate all of you sticking around with me today, and I wish you the absolute best on your teaching journey. Take care, everybody.